Hello, I'm Craig Constantine.
Hi, this is Orlando Bishop, Coach Orlando of Align Performance. Glad to be here.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you for taking the time. Took us a while because I always feel bad because I hound the expletive deleted out of people. But a lot of times people are like, "No, I can't make it, but please keep hounding me. No, I can't make it. Please keep hounding me." And to your credit, you were clearly interested from the beginning. So thank you for taking the time.
Absolutely.
I ask people a pretty standard question these days at the front of this before we're recording, and the topic that we got on right away was talking about freedom.
Yes.
And I asked you, I like to try and find a new twist on it. So I could say, well, what it is about podcasting that makes you think of freedom? That's a really obvious question. And I asked you instead, why did you feel like going to podcast would give you freedom that you weren't getting somewhere else?
Right. Yeah. Well, I've written for television. I actually came out. I live in Los Angeles. I came out to LA to get in Hollywood and make movies and make TV and all that. And so I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to deal with the gatekeepers, right? I have this idea and I think people are going to like it, but then there's a whole other audience of people in between me and the people I think will like it and who I have to convince that's a real thing that we should actually do. And so one of the things I loved about podcasting was that it allowed me to say, I think they'll like it this way. Let's go for it. And so that really fed me and served me, and being able to sort of have this short window, really as short as I want it to be. I've maybe made it a little longer than some because I like to post and I get to trimming every and ah and adding my music, and we'll talk about all that stuff. But
there's something to be said for polishing. Like, and what I say for it is I don't do any of that. But
which I also really like, because I think there's a freedom of saying, like, there's no rule, right? Like one person may just post their conversation, another person doesn't. I am hoping that there's a podcast I was a contributor to, and the episodes are going to be, 2 hours plus. And so that's a whole thing, and that they're doing. And for the audience that would enjoy that, I think they're going to love it. Now, does the audience who's looking for 30 minutes on the way to work want that? Absolutely not. So I also like that piece, like everything isn't for everybody. And then you're able to go off and do that and find your folks. And if for you, the 15 people you found who are listening and enjoying, or that's your target, then run with that. And for someone else, maybe they're looking to build a wider audience. So I like that it can be whatever we want it to be. And honestly, I'm more controlling myself because I always like the shiny new object. So I'm really controlling myself right now, because I'm like, oh yeah, we can do storytelling and we can have a show that does a bit, right? So I'm trying to control yourself. Yeah.
It sounds to me like you don't have the problem of being stuck as fuck. I think you have the problem of being like, before I was saying, I heard someone say, that this person said, what really works for me is when I manage to have like an urgency with a focus. So my hair's on fire, but I'm running toward a particular goal, as opposed to running around in circles like Daffy Duck,
like a crazy
which is usually
exactly.
Do you find that when you cracked open the door and snuck into podcasting land and realized all these things that you could do with it, was there anything in particular that you went, oh my goodness, I hadn't even thought of, like I could run in this direction and do a host of mic, I could bring in get, like what really was like a surprising freedom?
Well, one thing I'm thinking about, and I do want to come to, there's some things that we're, hopefully we'll touch on that and that I'm doing now, but I have several projects that are byproducts of all that time I spent thinking about what film and TV projects could happen. And I'm very curious about the idea of doing, essentially dramatic podcasts of really having people tune in, and it's the next episode of blank, and how might we do that? Or could we take a movie idea that we had, and there's one I have in particular that's a hip hop musical, and we had it set up over at Fox and this and that and whatever. It didn't ever make it to the screen, and I've always thought it was just a great project that just never found the right home. And could we do it? Could we produce it and maybe send it out into the world in 10-minute episodes and see what happens? It's just sitting there right now, so it can't hurt. And I think that this might be a really interesting way, again, to find an audience that wants it and that will enjoy it and appreciate it without having to convince people who aren't really of that audience, oh, no, it'll really work. You'll make your money back. You won't get fired, which is a big Hollywood thing. Right? Like that's the problem in Hollywood. Is everybody's just scared. Everybody's like, no. This is not exactly like the thing that's working right now. And so I'm gonna get fired if I walk into my boss's office with your crazy idea. So yeah, no thanks.
Yeah. I'm gonna make candy canes. They're gonna be orange and pink.
Right.
No, that's not gonna work. But it's gonna taste exactly the same. No, that's not how it works. Candy canes look like this.
Exactly.
I hadn't really thought about that. I started podcasting this show and other shows, and I was just like, this is what I want to do on Press and Record. I never really looked at it from the point of view of what should I be doing. I mean, there's been a lot of, I put an episode out and then I listen to it later and I go, oh my God, like, all right, we need microphone stands, or like whatever. Right. Like you learn lessons along the way. Like,
for sure.
I'm gonna go back and edit can I edit history?
Yeah. So, there's a power too, though, to what you said that is that you can put something out and not, because of the low barrier of entry, you can have that moment, right? You can have the moment where you say, oh yeah, I wouldn't do that way going forward. Or from now on, I want the intro. I'm going to have a new intro for every season, or I'm going to, and that it's okay. That it's, oh, I thought I was going to interview the person for an hour and a half, but it turns out 45 minutes is plenty, and that you can adjust then, and it doesn't make the first episode wrong. And I like that too. I like that sort of energy of that. Always be testing, to quote someone near and dear to both of us. But always be testing. Yeah.
Iterate.
That's right.
I think one thing podcasting cured me of, I mean, like podcasting, listening to podcasts. So as a listener of podcasts, as a consumer, one thing it cured me of was my urge to always start at the front. I used to, I found a blog. Oh, there's 3,000 posts. I can start at the front. Get a lot of coffee and I do it over a weekend. But podcasts, I was like, it became so clear to me that not all of them, but some of them suck horribly, or in the middle, they completely change format. And that's fine. Like I don't want to dump my 7,000 users, so I'm just going to do something different. And I really learned this lesson of Craig, you don't need to think of the podcast as an entire single entity. I can think of it as, some of these episodes really run together. Oh, I broke it apart. It's it's a 4-part interview. That's kind of like one thing. But I really learned this lesson of I can just dip in and really like love on this episode with this particular guest. And then I took that away when I started podcasting. I'm like, if I did that episode and I think it sucks when I listen to it 3 years later, that's okay. Because somebody's probably going to love it, even though they're not the avatar that I was imagining when I made it. There's probably an avatar. So then I had this whole new dimension of what, we talk a lot, everybody talks a lot about imagining who you're creating for, or who is the avatar that you're creating for.
Right.
And then I thought, oh yeah, but the avatar changes. And then I'm like, oh yeah. And then there's the whole fact of like, once you publish it, it doesn't really matter who I was making it for.
That's right.
So I learned a lot just listening and like, I can't listen to all these episodes.
Right. There was interestingly sort of along that of someone maybe not being the avatar. So I was in a conversation with an entrepreneur, a woman who I've been friends with. We worked at a company together and just have stayed in touch. And she put me onto this book, and I'm not going to think of the author's name, and I apologize, but she put me onto this book, Chillpreneur.
We can apply in the forum.
Yeah. So Chillpreneur was the name of the book. And so I listened to this book, and it is 100% targeting women. Like it's clear that the audience and explicitly so. But I got a ton out of it, just a ton. And really thought in some ways that it spoke to me much more so than some books I've read that I think were much more male centric around starting your business and being a captain of your ship kind of
protagonist
stuff. Yeah. And so I found myself going, that's probably going to be true for me. And I think there's a value to continuing to think about that avatar, because it helps you to be specific in ways that in the end may land other ways. But I think it still leads to choices and
focus.
And I think that has served me well.
Random things. I'm going to play
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Craig Sounds Omniscient card. Hey, tell me more about music in your podcast. To people listening, they're like, what? I'm like, well, we
Yeah,
talk
how'd you
about
get to
things in
that?
advance. I have a list.
Yeah. So yeah, so interestingly, I was in the podcasting workshop, Akimbo, and was sort of pushed toward it by my friend and coach and client and a whole bunch sister-in-law and just a whole bunch of other things. Nadine Kelly, who has her own great podcast and the Yogi MD podcast, and now she's actually graduating to MPK Health Integration, so I'm very excited for her. But at any rate, she had done a lot of work in Akimbo and said to me, all right, we've talked about this, you need to do it, get in there and do it. And
Here's
so
your friendly shove.
yeah, exactly. Hope you learn how to swim. There you go. But I did, and it was so exciting to jump in there. And she was going to be my first guest, and I'm listening, and a lesson came along that was about music. And so I thought,
Which one do you mean?
yeah, and I was
How
like,
hard could this be?
I was like, I doubt it, but let me, to say I've done it, I'm going through this experience. I'll throw some music that I had created for a totally different project on there just to see. And within 30 seconds, I was like, oh, this is going to be everything. Like it just completely changed my vision for the project. And so what I now do is I've created a piece of music for each guest. One guest said, I thought like, well, what kind of music?
Props, by the way. That's crazy amounts of work.
And it's really turned into a lot. Like usually the creation of the basic song is 4 hours, and then I usually have variations of it within the episode. So that's another, that's probably another hour or two we could account for in the editing time where I jump out and go, oh, I need this to like not have this part in it, or I need this to just sort of be the drum piece. But I feel like it's made Unstuck AF, which is the name of the podcast. It's made Unstuck AF very specific and true to me. I love music. I directed a film called Dinner for Two, and that was all centered around music, and I drove everybody crazy because they were like, this is a low budget film, how are we going to get the rights to all this stuff? And I was like, just go make it so, because I just I just love music, and it's always been a part of how I've experienced things. And so now with these episodes, I've really had this opportunity to flex this piece of me and jump into GarageBand. And it's been great. It's been great fun. And again, I feel like it's made Unstuck AF specific and different. And some people may find it distracting, and I understand and respect that, and certainly don't want to lose people, but feel like I want this to be different. I want this to be something that every couple of weeks during the season, when you see that pop up, that you think, I'm going to have that experience, and I'm not going to have that experience anywhere else. So I can choose not to have it, but it's not like I can choose from 50 places where the host is producing a specific song for the score. And I really do think of it as a score instead of it just being background music. I really think of it as a score. I also respect that I'm, creating stuff in GarageBand, and I don't think that any of the big record companies are coming through. So I've decided that I don't create great music, but I create superior music. That's what I've decided.
I wasn't that. Now it sounds like you're knocking yourself down a peg. I was thinking, I've said countless times, and people say this a lot, that there's magic in the auditory experience when as a consumer of the piece, you know that nobody can see you. It's not like if you're at a theater, watching a live production, you can't pick your nose. Like people are going to see you. It's like you have to be like on point, on game. And there's something about the intimacy of audio. We all know that. And I'm thinking like, well, you're just sort of like being true to that by saying, well, if this is audio, then audio is not just, two people between ferns, then it's also going to have some sort of sound. And I like your insight about it being a sound, a score. I was going to say, it's not just a soundtrack. Sorry, my brain went off on a tangent. I just yesterday started watching, I'm halfway through the latest Bond film. And I noted at the beginning in the opening credits that the score is by Hans Zimmer. I was just like, whoa. well, oh man, we got Zimmer to do this. I'm like, it's just in my brain. I know that the
Mm-hmm.
score plays such an important part in film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So now I'm like, oh, I guess I should score my shows.
I think it does come
Not.
out of my no. It's so, but again, it's true to like who I am and how I experience things. I think it does come out of my film background to some degree, and so I do have a sense of like, oh well, if we set up this theme here, then by the time it comes around at the end of the episode, and if I play, have that in there, then people are going to experience it. So yeah, it's
let's not start talking
fun.
about film. I'm a film I'm not. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, the shark Jaws. It's just the 6 notes. There's the
Isn't that
it's just
wild?
the sound. Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been how many years since that film came out, and still, if any of us here,
I think I was too young to even see that in the original theater. I've only ever seen that like maybe on a midnight showing somewhere.
Right.
I once had the divine privilege of seeing an original print of Dr. No, the original Bond film from like 67 or 68 or something.
Wow.
It ran it as a midnight movie, one of my little podunk theaters. But back in the 80s, maybe early 90s, when they still had film projectors, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it actually came around and it was like, da-da, da, da.
That's awesome.
It actually makes a big deal out of it being in stereo. Which is the whole where I was going with this. It's like, okay, so things that were in stereo once used to be really amazing. Now it's all this stuff. When you're scoring, what I'm thinking is the average person listening to this show. My mom doesn't even listen. I can't even say hi, Mom. People are probably not used to thinking about scoring something, and I'm wondering if there are any like tips or things that like you could drop us some some truth bombs that would help us think about maybe some lessons from scoring that we can think about when we're editing our shows.
Absolutely. I think really connecting to the experience we want people to have, not necessarily just what we want them to hear or learn, but really what's the experience that we want them to have. I think of Unstuck AF very much. What I came to and it served me was it's a pregame speech for your life. I do sports coaching as well. So like that's a strength. Yeah. And there's a sense of like, okay, when you finish this, like I want you to, when you are done and we
jump up and
off,
your chair falls over, right?
Exactly. You're like, here we go. And that's the goal. And so the music is intended to sort of carry that through and to help you really tap into the experience of the person's describing. Where did they get unstuck? How did they get unstuck? And end the episode on that up note of, yes, we all go through things, some very different than others, but that experience of we can soldier on, we can move forward. I want to be a piece of it. So really thinking about the experience. And the other is thinking about how to repeat things without being repetitive, because I think that there's something about having a certain theme that's in the music or what have you carry through, and people have an emotional reaction to it, even if they're not consciously aware of it. But then you do have to be mindful that, if they hear the same thing, my episodes run 45 to 60 minutes. No one wants to spend, 45 to 60 minutes listening to the same like 6 notes, right? So there you go. Yeah.
Cool.
Did I answer the question you asked me? I'm not sure.
Actually, you did. You answered the question exactly. I think it's pretty. I always say this is. I really enjoy doing this like high wire or trapeze work.
Yeah.
And it looks like there's no net. We have like an opportunity at the end to decide if the show is going to see the light of day. But we're really like trying to do acrobatics without a net. And I always, it never ceases to amaze me when, I smash some together words with a question mark on the end, and then people manage to go, I think I see what you're trying to ask about. Going? So yeah, you asked it exactly. Any other parting thoughts as we approach the end of the drag race?
Yeah, absolutely. So heading towards season 2, and one of the lessons for me is that it's okay that I'm learning. And having talked to people who said, oh, well, it was 50, I'm doing 10 episode seasons. Well, I was 50 episodes in, or I was 35 episodes in, or whatever it is, when I felt like I really hit my stride. And being open to that and just encouraging other people to be open to that. I can get very much into a perfectionist place of like, this should, stand on its own forever, and it should be all figured out. And, these should be the exact questions. And there's a real fun to be had and a value in wandering down a road thinking, if next time that kind of thing comes up, I think I'll handle it this way or that way. So yeah, just being continually open to things changing and happy accidents. I mean, again, the music, I was halfway through the process of going through the workshop and really thought I was pretty close to shipping that first episode before I even discovered that music could play such a big role. And now I can't even fathom what the podcast would be without it. And then the other thing I would say is really think about how the podcast fits into your life and your plan or your business. For me, it's really going to been a cornerstone now in the direction I'm moving of wanting to create community around the system we've created for strategy. And so we've got our online community that we just launched, which is We Align. And so people are heading there. The podcast seems to have developed its own following, and I've been happy with the number of downloads. Nice. I don't think Joe Rogan's, losing any sleep over me, but I definitely
Does the community have a URL? Where is the community? Do you have it? Is it
yeah, sure. It's We Align, all one word, WEALIGN.alignp.com. Nice. So come on by and check us out, and really thank you so much for being out there, listening and sharing and creating all these different podcasts. If there's one regret I have, is that I now realize there's no way I'm going to make it even to all the podcast episodes of the people I know and love and want to support, never mind everything that's out there. Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
Well, Orlando, I think that's a delightful place to call it for today. Thank you so much for taking the time. It was a pleasure to get, I think this is our first actual real one-on-one conversation about Hollywood Squares Zoom style. So definitely a blast. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Take care.